Man, Sonic is turning 35 this year, and there are a lot of his games that end up dividing opinions. Some are cooler than others. But since we're here in this festive mood, I want to talk to you about those games that, in fact, if someone asks me which one I recommend to play, since you guys do that pretty often, I'm going to recommend these ones because these are essential games and maybe they're the best Sonic games for you to buy nowadays, if you don't have any. Which I think is tough, since you like Sonic and click to find out which games are good. I've already discussed several on the channel, with playlists for original games, fan games, and creepypastas. And go ahead and drop a comment below which is the best Sonic game you've ever played, alright? Because I'm going to talk now about the essential Sonic games. I'll start with the obvious, Sonic Mania Plus. This game here basically captures the entire essence of the classic mode, adds the encore mode, you can switch characters, and it really shows that classic Sonic still has potential. Literally, we're talking about a classic Sonic game with unity, literally gameplay that mixes modern and classic elements at the same time. I mention this because the visuals remind me of the original Sonic games. The ones that came out for the Genesis, which a lot of people in Brazil have known over the years. Probably your dad or your grandfather knows this game here, but there's also a detail. This version was made recently, which completely changes a lot of people's expectations because it extends into classic stages that they ended up reusing and recreating. In the same way, you can also, explore, for example, completely new stages with a music arrangement that's really good, references to other Sega franchises like Puyo in The Boss here at Chemical Plant, bringing back characters like Mighty Ray, who were forgotten for a long time. And this game here was part of a really great revival that Sega had at the end of the last decade, which changed a lot of things in the minds of many people who play nowadays. You can even play it on your phone because Netflix has a really good partnership with Sega now. Another one I highly recommend is Sonic Adventure. This was the first major 3D Sonic game which shaped how many people grew up with Sonic. This is also the first game with a big narrative and a story that's told from different points of view. Here, Sonic is dealing with problems, and a hunt for the Chaos Emeralds against Eggman, bizarre fights with Knuckles, who was tricked by Eggman many times over and over again. In this story, Tails nearly dies, and an ancient Echidna tribe's tale explains why Knuckles is alone. And on top of that, a story connected with other characters, so you can use the power of friendship here to give Sonic back the power of the Chaos Emeralds, which creates an extremely epic ending for those who followed this journey from start to finish. The cool thing about this game is that it really gives you multiple perspectives, and it also has gameplay that a lot of people actually like. Playing as Tails is interesting because his campaign becomes a race against Sonic. Knuckles is a treasure hunter collecting pieces of the Master Emerald, which was shattered at the beginning of the story. Amy is being chased by a big robotic nemesis, and there's a robot from the series, and Dr. Eggman orders the capture of all the Chaos Emeralds and a frog with a tail, because it also has an emerald with it, giving Sonic a shooting game that actually works pretty well. Maybe the biggest flaw is playing as Big, since it's literally a fishing game inside the Sonic universe just to catch the little frog Froggy, which is a nightmare to capture. This is the biggest problem with the game. Moving on to something more recent, one that I ended up reviewing last year is Sonic Racing CrossRoads, which is a Sonic racing game that, for me, is the best racing game for this generation for anyone who has a new console. Here you have the whole Sonic crew in a Mario Kart style game, but much more technical, since you have several characters with different classes. Cars with different attributes, and that also completely changed the gameplay. Even more so with equipment, like tools you put on your cars that give you special powers like Hatsune Miku, who I ended up playing as in this game, and she spins like a top. This game here is really cool because of the references. The stages are always tied to a certain Sonic era. There are connections to both newer and older games. And also, its online multiplayer is connected across all the platforms it was released on, like people on PC play with those playing on Switch 1, PlayStation 5, and Xbox. This game is still getting a lot of updates, but I'll tell you that this is one of the best things Sega has managed to release lately, and it's almost a must-have for everyone who doesn't have a Nintendo, because the Nintendo crowd is on Mario Kart, but Sonic Racing is really awesome. And this one is the shocking one, Shadow Generations. This game was released along with the remaster of Sonic Generations, bringing a brand new campaign specifically for Shadow, showing some events from his story between the older games and also what happened during the time of Sonic Generations. Here, Shadow is in a white void, being watched by Black Doom, and he goes through stages that are specific to his story, like the Space Colony arc. And he also ends up using new abilities, which are the Chaos Control abilities and also Black Doom's abilities. He even gets wings, almost looking like Venom. The cool thing about this game, is that it's really awesome because it's a game that puts Shadow in a campaign that explains why he stopped being that guy who's angry all the time. And it also puts him on a journey to find peace, since at least he had a moment to meet his dearest loved ones. I'm talking about Gerald Robotnik and Maria Robotnik. And also that being who is part of his story, Black Doom. The cool thing about this game is that it really shows that Shadow can also have boost gameplay but with slightly different paths and writing. And since this game takes place in the past, they also end up including stages that come from the future, from Sonic's timeline, where in a way Shadow had some kind of connection or participation, at least in almost all the stages. Yeah, Sonic Frontiers wasn't really the case. This is one of the best games, man, that Sega has managed to release in recent times, and they rode the hype of the release of Sonic 3, the movie, to be able to include something related to Shadow. This one is kind of hard to defend, right? A lot of people love to criticize this game because it goes through cycles of praise and criticism. I'm talking about Sonic Lost Road. I have a special fondness for this game since it was one of the first Wii U games I completed, and I also made a gameplay series on this channel. What really changes is the gameplay style. It tried to get much closer to the Nintendo audience because for a long time it was exclusive to Nintendo, and here it has a much more cartoonish look than we're used to. It takes all the details that came from classic games, like badniks with flicks inside their bodies, something that wasn't very common to use in the more recent generations. The very enemies that Sonic ends up facing, the Deadly Six, end up having a certain resemblance to the Koopalings in a kind of bizarre way since both groups are equally incompetent. And it also ended up using a kind of gameplay here that focuses a lot on cylinders. Sonic is always running in circles in different scenarios as if they were asteroids. It seems like there's some inspiration from Mario Galaxy, but man, just play a little and you'll realize it's nothing like that. The gameplay is what truly deserves praise in this game. It's very focused on parkour, Sonic can walk on walls, and he also has a dash button which gives you a certain control that kind of reminds me a bit of Sonic back in the Sonic Adventure days when there was no boost. You would run with Sonic and pick up speed boosts, but here it's a little different. You press a button to speed up, and even then he doesn't have, that boost to just take off running where you can barely see the scenery and the stages. I thought Sega might take this game in that direction a bit more. But they probably didn't give up on this project because, well, they released it on Steam and you can play this game there. Even knowing it's a ported version with a lot of content cut, the definitive version is still on the Wii U. I think it's a shame that people don't like this game that much, but I like it because Sega tried to do something new. And finally, Sonic Unleashed, that game with the most epic opening that everyone loves. It seems like Sega made an animated movie way before Nintendo made an animated Super Mario movie. Here is the famous Sonic game where you control Dog Sonic, the Werehog, or Sonic's werewolf form, where the stages are split into two types. Here you have daytime stages, with Sonic capturing and reviving the Chaos Emeralds, using for the first time the boost gameplay in the best possible way, which ended up becoming the trademark of the following games in the series. But at night, you control the Werehog, or Sonic's werewolf form, which has gameplay very similar to what we saw in God of War, with Sonic using his stretching fists and performing various combos, with several shadowy creatures called Dark Gaia, and they're literally monsters that came from the center of the world. This game has a much more emotional vibe, mainly because of Chip, who is a character with no memory, but he ends up discovering his purpose in all of this, and also his destiny. The stages are very iconic, so much so that Sega even reused some enemies from this game to put in other games as a reference. And it was also that big apology Sega made after the huge fiasco that was, Sonic 2006. A lot of people are still really into this game today because of all the nostalgia and excitement, and this also defined what Sonic was for a long time, until the arrival of Sonic Frontiers. To be honest, Sonic has a lot of good games and I could add a lot more, but these are the first ones that come to mind when I want to recommend a new game for you to play. I know these are the best ones. There are others that aren't in this video, but there are some that are actually the worst for you to start with. If you play those as your first Sonic game, you'll hate it. They're in this video that should be showing up on the screen. Thank you very much, see you, I'm out, and see you in the next video.